So there's a long time saying that wherever there's smoke, there is fire. And last week we reacted to the opposition leader in St. Lucia and an address that he made in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to a delegation from the OECS. And in that statement, he stated that, look, what if the Eastern Caribbean islands pull out of CARICOM? So fast forward, now we're talking about the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and based on his statement in the same meeting, it seems as if the Prime Minister of St. Vincent is accusing the former government of Trinidad and Tobago of exploiting the Eastern Caribbean islands. So, let's talk about it. So I believe the St. Lucian opposition leader, Alan Chasnett, opened up our eyes in the Caribbean. I know for most of us in the Caribbean, CARICOM, we have been talking about CARICOM for decades and that CARICOM is not working and CARICOM does not seem to be moving and what could be the problem with CARICOM. So in that meeting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines last week, the opposition leader from St. Lucia, Alan Chasnett, pretty much opened our eyes to something that I never thought of before. I thought that CARICOM was not working because the Caribbean leaders are just lackadaisical and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But because of what he said now I'm having a different perspective and I'm realizing that there seem to be some infighting within CARICOM, like a fighting amongst each other in the Caribbean. And just in case you forgot what the opposition leader said, let me just give you a little clip of what he said last week.
Because certainly when I was Prime Minister, I felt that we were being ignored. I felt we were being disrespected. I felt so many times we went to a meeting at CARICOM and listened to the larger countries debate among themselves as if we were not even there, Madam Speaker.
Yes, so that was the opposition leader from St. Lucia. And honestly, that is the first time I've heard any leader within CARICOM publicly coming out and criticizing. Because imagine, like, what he's describing is like the bigger islands like Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, is like they're in the room making these power play and ignoring like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia. And honestly, like I've never heard any leader came out and said anything like that before. So that just gave me a different perspective, what is really going on in CARICOM. And the odd thing is that these are the same islands that are the reason, they are the ones that backed out of the West Indies Federation. And now we're seeing that not only did Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago were a big problem why the West Indies Federation failed, but now they are at the center of why CARICOM is not working and why, in my personal belief, I think that we are seeing the last of CARICOM. Like CARICOM could be failing right in front of our eyes. And then to add to that, to see now the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines coming out in such an aggressive way and talking about what's been going on between their relationship, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Trinidad and Tobago, was another eye-opener for me. And this, like, I was shocked when I see Ralph Gonzalez and how, I don't know, I think Ralph is, going in his last term. I don't know if he's going to win this election, but I think he's just ready to call out everyone. And Trinidad, he did call Trinidad out. So let's take a look at some of the clips, some of what the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines had to say about Trinidad and why, in my opinion, what the Prime Minister had to say seemed like, for lack of a better word, like he's trying to say the Trinidad government, in particular the past 10 years, was trying to exploit the smaller islands in the Eastern Caribbean island. So just take a look and I'm going to break it down bit by bit what the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines had to say.
First, it is evident that the trading arrangements of CARICOM have benefited the member states with a larger territorial and economic base. particularly in respect of manufacturing commodities. And the comparatively cheaper energy resource in Trinidad and Tobago has additionally made that country's manufacturing sector the uneven beneficiary from CARICOM's trade in commodities. Indeed, prior to the OECS member states signing on to the CARICOM Single Market and Economy of the Revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, the OECS conducted an authoritative economic study which confirmed that the CARICOM arrangements disadvantaged the OECS manufacturing sector. It is nevertheless true that without a special protection offered through Article 164 of the CARICOM Treaty to the production of flour in the OECS, our Eastern Caribbean flour mills in St. Vincent and the Grenadines' very existence would be in grave jeopardy. But this protection for our flour, for example, under Article 164 of the Revised Treaty of Chaguaramas of CARICOM, this protection is time-bound periodically and always in jeopardy. On the last occasion on which this matter came up for renewal, the opposition of Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Barbados almost scuttled this protection. Fortunately, my government was able to secure continued protection under the rules through the combined support of the OECS countries, Guyana, Haiti, Belize, and Suriname. Next time, will the anchor hold?
Okay, let's pause right here. So in that clip, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines mentioned Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Barbados as it pertains to the Caribbean single market economy. The Caribbean single market economy is one of the few things that CARICOM really signed that we still have active today. But what the Prime Minister is saying here is that, look, the Caribbean single market economy benefits Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Barbados more than the other 7 islands. And that is fair, because this is something that I've talked about a lot when I travel to different Caribbean islands and when I have conversation about the Caribbean islands. What I've said on numerous occasions is that whenever you go to like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you go to any other the Caribbean islands, you will see Jamaica there, you will see Trinidad and Tobago there for the most part, because Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago were pretty much the manufacturing hub within the Caribbean based on the population size and based on, in Trinidad and Tobago, the low cost of energy. So Trinidad would dominate the Caribbean. A lot of, when you go to like St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Barbados, like a lot of Trinidadian products are in the supermarket. But on the flip side, you don't see products from Grenada, you don't see products from St. Lucia. In Jamaica, you don't see it in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think that is a big problem here that the Prime Minister is addressing. And the thing about this, the hypocrisy is real, because I believe that the basic thing that should have been done within CARICOM is to protect the markets for like the Eastern Caribbean islands. So for example, Grenada with their chocolate. Grenada chocolate should be protected at all costs. Grenada is a smaller population, and it would not be reasonable, it would not be fair for like Jamaican cocoa or Jamaican chocolate finished product to end up in Grenada at a cheaper price. And why I believe that this is a level of hypocrisy is because we saw when the Trump administration came into office and we saw everyone worried about the Caribbean Basin Initiative, and even the Prime Minister of Jamaica came out about the Caribbean Basin Initiative and that how it would, the negative impact it would have on Jamaica and the wider Caribbean if we lose the privilege that America gives the Caribbean in terms of the Caribbean Basin Initiative. So to see the Caribbean panic about a benefit coming from America, and within CARICOM, they cannot guarantee the Eastern Caribbean islands like a benefit similar to the Caribbean Basin Initiative, I believe that that is a level of hypocrisy. And the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines didn't just stop there, he continued. And here's more of what he had to say.
Undoubtedly, The producers in Trinidad and Tobago want to take over the entire flour market in the Eastern Caribbean. We in St. Vincent and the Grenadines will draw a line in the sand on this. Secondly, the foreign exchange control arrangements in Trinidad and Tobago have conspired to reduce to near nothingness a hitherto US $12 to $15 million annual trade in agricultural exports from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This injustice has caused manifest material difficulties to farmers and agro-traders in my country. Our country pays Trinidad and Tobago annually in excess of US $65 million. We pay in hard foreign currency for visible exports from Trinidad, mainly petroleum products and manufactured goods. But our sister CARICOM country cannot find less than a miserly $4 million US in foreign exchange to pay for our agricultural products. This is absolutely unfair and ridiculous. Our traders are paid in Trinidad and Tobago dollars, which are not convertible outside of Trinidad and Tobago. In Trinidad, they have to use the money to buy goods in Trinidad if they want to make some money on the back end. If they bring up the Trinidad and Tobago money, it may as well they bring up monopoly money.
So this is where the Prime Minister started to expose Trinidad and Tobago. And two things that stood out to me. The first was about the flour industry. And as I stated earlier, the protection for smaller islands should be non-negotiable. Because if we're all going to be a part of CARICOM, this body, I believe that the smaller Caribbean islands with a smaller market, with a smaller population, should be protected. Their jobs should be protected. So the fact that what the Prime Minister is stating, that the flour industry in St. Vincent and the Grenadines was under threat in terms of to be taken over because Trinidad and Tobago would want to dump like flour on all of the Eastern Caribbean islands, even the ones that produce their own. That is the level of hypocrisy that I talk about, because we see this problem within the Caribbean. We see it in Jamaica. We see it in Trinidad and Tobago, where like the larger markets like America, Mexico, because of globalization and the way how the global marketplace works, and we see places like Mexico and the US, they can produce things at like half the rate of what we would produce in the Caribbean. And we have seen the result in Jamaica, in Trinidad, right across the Caribbean, where like chicken and like potatoes and you name it, things would be dumped into the Caribbean, and those things would just ruin the farming industry in the Caribbean. And to see another Caribbean island carrying out the same type of injustice within a group of Caribbean islands, within CARICOM, I think that is where the Prime Minister started to expose what was going on between Trinidad and some of the Eastern Caribbean islands. And the second thing that stood out was the trade imbalance. He stated $65 million in trade St. Vincent gives to Trinidad and Tobago, and $4 million Trinidad and Tobago, they are purchasing $4 million US from St. Vincent and the Grenadines in produce. But the most egregious thing that stood out to me was that Trinidad and Tobago would be paying St. Vincent and the Grenadines in Trinidadian dollars. I did not even know that was possible. Honestly, I did not know that was possible. Because I thought that, look, the world trade in US dollars, and that is standard across the world. So for the Prime Minister to be saying that, look, they fork out $65 million US dollars every year to pay for oil, to pay for things to go in the supermarket, and Trinidad and Tobago, $4 million US dollars worth of produce, and they are paying in Trinidadian currency. That is wild. So this is where, as I said, like he really started to expose the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And I don't know what is going on with Trinidad and Tobago, but I'm realizing now that everything is being connected now, because we saw last year with the foreign exchange crisis that is going on in Trinidad and Tobago. Is this an ongoing thing? What is going on in Trinidad and Tobago with their foreign exchange currency? Because obviously, if they are going to pay farmers from St. Vincent and the Grenadines in Trinidadian currency, like that is wild. And as I said, I didn't even know that that was legal. And the Prime Minister continues. So let's break it down some more.
Thirdly, the collapse of the CLICO financial empire has left holders in the OECS encumbered with hundreds of millions of dollars of losses. There is still outstanding $64 million of the 100 million US dollars, which the last UNC administration under Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar had negotiated as a partial settlement with OECS countries. I know this well. I was involved in it. In Suriname, Kenny Anthony was there. That's to tell you how long ago this thing happened, you know. Kamla's government paid US $36 billion shortly before she left office over 10 years ago. But the successor administration has failed or refused to honor the prior commitment. We reasonably expect that the new Persad-Bissessar administration will address this soonest. Fourthly, Trinidad and Tobago's continued control of our OECS airspace for its near-exclusive material benefit through its control of the relevant oversight authority remains a contentious issue which demands urgent resolution. This bristles. Neither Barbados nor the OECS has representation on that oversight body. We get no accounting, and there is no transparency. This oversight body, when it was established as a colonial construct, it has been since independence in Trinidad and Tobago, has been accorded a measure of seeming permanence.
Okay, so this is where things seem to take another turn, and this seems like it is not just a problem between Trinidad and Tobago and the Eastern Caribbean, but this seems more like a problem between the previous government, the PNM government, with Dr. Keith Rowley. Because what the Prime Minister said here is that there was an agreement that was made with the UNC government under the Prime Minister, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, for $100 million US dollars, and she paid out $36 million before she left office 10 years ago. And since then, the $100 million, nothing else was paid on that. So this seemed to be a problem between what he's describing, the PNM government, the previous government, and defaulting on an agreement that was agreed upon between Trinidad and Tobago and the Eastern Caribbean islands. So this is getting very interesting. And this one now is, I think, the biggest shocker of anything that I've seen so far, and is when the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines claim about Trinidad's control over the airspace within the Eastern Caribbean, and that is wild, because we have been talking about things like this for decades, and this seemed like a colonial type of move where we have been talking about what is happening in Europe. Why is it so difficult for a straight flight to fly into the Caribbean from Europe? Because of the Europeans and the Americans controlling the entire airspace, and they would not allow Caribbean flight from connecting from Africa to the Caribbean for decades. We have had that conversation over and over again, but just to see that this is happening within the Caribbean, and now I'm thinking, is this why regional travel is like a mess? Regional travel is garbage. Like, if you want to fly from Jamaica to Trinidad, from Barbados to Guyana, anywhere within the region, it's a nightmare. A lot of people would have to, if you're flying from, say, Jamaica to Barbados, chances are to get where you want on time, you might have to fly into Miami. So now I'm wondering, is this a cause why the regional travel is such a mess? Because I don't understand how would Trinidad and Tobago control the airspace for the Eastern Caribbean islands. And now we're seeing like a bit more air traffic going into places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now we're seeing Grenada with the development of the airport, the extension of the airport. We're seeing more flights going in. But this is just crazy that I did not know all of this information. And as I'm saying, like Ralph Gonsalves, I believe that this is a prime minister that is on his last term and is just probably burning all the relationships that he have within CARICOM, because after a lot of these things that is coming out now, the same way we saw the Prime Minister of Antigua Barbuda, Gaston Brown, upset with Ralph Gonsalves, I'm sure he's stepping on a lot of corns right now, and I'm sure Dr. Keith Raleigh is not happy, but I'm waiting for his response. So it didn't end there. It continued.
It is instructive to note that the Patrick Manning administrations in Trinidad and Tobago realized in practice that the OECS countries were unequally yoked in CARICOM, and his successive governments in the 21st century made compensatory arrangements by the establishment of a special fund to assist our countries. Moreover, Patrick Manning, a deeply committed regionalist in theory and practice, also ensured that foreign exchange was available for our agricultural products. He too was always compliant with Trinidad and Tobago's contribution to the CARICOM Development Fund, the CDF, which was established under Section 158 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to assist with the socio-economic development of disadvantaged countries, regions, and sectors in CARICOM. A village in my constituency, Manning Village, is named in honor of this great Trinidadian and Caribbean leader on account of his profound solidarity, a pearl perhaps greater than his tribe.
So it is very interesting that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, that in this segment he ended with Patrick Manning. Patrick Manning, one of the great prime ministers of the Caribbean, and also someone from the PNM party. So it is obvious that this thing that is going on with Ralph Gonsalves, like whatever is expressing right now, it has to do with the Keith Raleigh government. That is what I'm getting from it. That is everything that he's exposing about what is going on between Trinidad and Tobago and the Eastern Caribbean. It just seemed to me that it had to do with the Prime Minister, the previous Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Raleigh, and that he is just frustrated with how the Eastern Caribbean islands, the treatment that they have been receiving within CARICOM. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section so far. What do you think about, I would call this a rant that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines went on. And I'm happy that he came out and said all of this, because I've been having conversation about CARICOM for a long time. And every time I'm in a group of Caribbean, with a group of Caribbean people and we're talking about CARICOM, most times we come to the conclusion that it's just negligence, like people are, the leaders are just not very enthused about CARICOM and coming together, and people are just selfish and want to do their own thing. But we're sensing, what I'm sensing right here is a bit of exploitation going on even within our Caribbean community. And that is wild, like, because everything that he expressed right here, that the challenges that they have been having with Trinidad and Tobago, it just seemed like the relationship, like from what he's saying, that the relationship with Trinidad and Tobago is one-sided, that Trinidad and Tobago wins all the time. And then when you look at Jamaica, it's like Jamaica is not interested in CARICOM at all. So Jamaica is just like disappear, and Trinidad and Tobago is one-sided, like things are working out in their favor, but not with the Eastern Caribbean island. So guys, sound off in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on this. And do you think after this rant that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines came out and you saw the opposition, Alan Chestnut from St. Lucia, what he came out with last week, Do you think that this is the end of CARICOM? Can CARICOM survive all of this thing that is going on now? Sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.